Welcome back to Bookburst, your go-to channel for deep dives into the world of psychological literature. Today, we're exploring a book that has not only changed how we understand trauma, but has also redefined the field of trauma therapy. The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. This book has had a profound impact on both mental health professionals and trauma survivors. It brings to light something many of us might have never considered. Trauma doesn't just exist in our minds, it deeply affects our bodies. Trauma alters how we think, how we feel, and even how we move. Today, we're going to unpack what van der Kolk means when he says, "The body keeps the score." We'll explore how trauma reshapes the brain, how it physically manifests in our bodies, and crucially, how we can heal. If you're interested in understanding how trauma lingers long after the event and how to overcome its effects, then stick with me. This book offers key insights into the nature of trauma and, more importantly, a path forward. To understand trauma's impact, we first need to start with the brain. When van der Kolk talks about trauma, he's not just referring to an emotional wound, but something that literally rewires the brain. In the book, he explains that traumatic experiences activate the brain's survival mechanisms, particularly the amygdala. The amygdala is responsible for detecting threats and activating our fight or flight response. For someone without trauma, the amygdala activates when a real, immediate threat is present. Like if you hear a sudden loud noise or see a car speeding toward you. Your body reacts almost instinctively, preparing you to either defend yourself or run. But in the case of trauma survivors, the amygdala becomes hyperactive. It remains on high alert, reacting to even minor stimuli as if they are life-threatening dangers. A small sound, a smell, or even a particular color can trigger the same fight or flight response as the original traumatic event. Imagine living in a world where your brain constantly perceives danger, even in situations that are objectively safe. This is the reality for many people living with trauma. Equally important is the hippocampus, another region of the brain heavily impacted by trauma. The hippocampus is like a librarian, organizing our experiences into coherent memories. It helps us understand the difference between past and present by filing away memories of our experiences into our mental archives. But trauma disrupts this process. Instead of the trauma being filed away as a past event, it remains unprocessed. The memories are fragmented and disorganized, leading to flashbacks, nightmares, and intrusive thoughts. These fragments can surface at any time, making trauma survivors feel like they are reliving the event over and over again. In this way, trauma hijacks the brain's ability to differentiate between what is happening now and what has already happened, trapping the survivor in a cycle of reliving their worst moments. This explains why some people experience flashbacks or become paralyzed by anxiety in situations that don't seem to warrant such extreme reactions. Their brain is stuck, unable to process the trauma in a way that allows them to move forward. But that's not all. The prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for reasoning, decision-making, and regulating emotions, also suffers under the weight of trauma. In a healthy brain, the prefrontal cortex acts as the voice of reason, calming the amygdala's fear response and helping us make rational decisions in the face of stress. It helps us step back and say, "This isn't actually dangerous. I'm safe." However, in trauma survivors, the prefrontal cortex loses its ability to regulate emotions effectively. This means that even when the survivor consciously knows they're safe, their brain can't convince the body to calm down. It's like having your foot stuck on the gas pedal of a car. No matter how much you try to brake, your brain is still speeding into survival mode. This imbalance between the emotional and rational parts of the brain explains why trauma survivors often struggle with emotional regulation, making it difficult to respond to everyday situations without becoming overwhelmed. Now that we've discussed how trauma alters the brain, let's move on to the body. One of the most groundbreaking insights van der Kolk offers in The Body Keeps the Score is that trauma isn't just a psychological event, it's a physical one. The body, quite literally, holds on to trauma. Have you ever noticed that when you're stressed, your shoulders tense up, your breathing becomes shallow, or you might even feel a knot in your stomach? These are examples of how our bodies respond to emotional stress. But with trauma, these physical responses become chronic. Trauma survivors often experience tightness, pain, or discomfort in their bodies that doesn't seem to have an obvious cause. This is because, as van der Kolk explains, the body remembers trauma. Even when the mind tries to forget or move on, the body continues to react as if the trauma is still happening. For many trauma survivors, the body remains in a state of hypervigilance. Muscles stay tense, the heart races, and breathing remains shallow as if the body is constantly preparing for the next threat. Over time, this can lead to chronic pain, fatigue, headaches, digestive issues, and even autoimmune conditions. The body becomes stuck in survival mode, unable to relax or feel safe. This is why many trauma survivors feel disconnected from their bodies, as if they're always bracing for impact, even in situations where they should be at ease. Kolk describes this as the body's way of keeping score, of holding on to trauma long after the mind has tried to forget. What's fascinating is that these physical reactions are not just psychological. The body's response to trauma is deeply physiological, involving the nervous system, the immune system, and the endocrine system. The autonomic nervous system, which controls our involuntary bodily functions like heart rate and digestion, becomes dysregulated in trauma survivors. The sympathetic nervous system, responsible for the fight or flight response, remains on high alert, while the parasympathetic nervous system, which promotes rest and relaxation, struggles to activate. This imbalance makes it difficult for trauma survivors to calm down, even when they're not in immediate danger. The constant flood of stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline wreaks havoc on the body, leading to a host of physical health problems. So, if trauma is stored in both the brain and the body, how do we heal? Kolk argues that healing from trauma requires a holistic approach, one that involves both the mind and the body. Traditional talk therapy is important, but it's often not enough to fully resolve trauma. Trauma survivors need to reconnect with their bodies, to release the tension and stress that has built up over time, and to reestablish a sense of safety in their own skin. This is where body-based therapies come in. Kolk highlights several practices that have shown promise in helping trauma survivors heal, including yoga, mindfulness, and body-focused therapies like somatic experiencing. Yoga, in particular, is a powerful tool for trauma survivors. By focusing on breath, movement, and mindfulness, yoga helps individuals reconnect with their bodies in a gentle and non-threatening way. It encourages trauma survivors to become aware of the sensations in their bodies without being overwhelmed by them. This practice of mindful awareness allows individuals to release the tension that has been stored in their muscles, to calm their nervous system, and to begin feeling safe in their bodies again. Kolk describes yoga as a way of bringing the mind and body back into alignment, creating a sense of presence and control that is often lost in the wake of trauma. In addition to yoga, mindfulness practices can also help trauma survivors develop a greater sense of control over their thoughts and emotions. Mindfulness teaches individuals to observe their thoughts and feelings without judgment, allowing them to become more aware of their emotional triggers and physical reactions. By practicing mindfulness, trauma survivors can learn to recognize when their body is going into survival mode and take steps to calm themselves before the stress response spirals out of control. This can be as simple as taking a few deep breaths or grounding oneself by focusing on the sensations of the present moment. Kolk also highlights the importance of newer, evidence-based therapies like neurofeedback and eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, EMDR. Neurofeedback involves training the brain to regulate its activity more effectively, helping trauma survivors regain control over their emotional responses. By monitoring brainwave patterns in real time, individuals can learn to modify their brain's response to stress, ultimately leading to greater emotional regulation and resilience. EMDR, on the other hand, is a form of therapy that helps individuals reprocess traumatic memories so that they no longer trigger the same intense emotional and physical responses. Through a series of guided eye movements, EMDR helps the brain reintegrate traumatic memories in a way that allows for healing. What's so revolutionary about Kolk's approach is that it acknowledges the full complexity of trauma. Trauma is not just a psychological wound that can be healed by talking about it. It's a physiological experience that affects every part of the body and mind. Kolk's work emphasizes that true healing requires addressing both the mental and physical aspects of trauma. It's about more than just reliving the trauma in therapy. It's about reclaiming control over your body and mind, learning to feel safe again, and reconnecting with yourself in a way that allows you to move forward. In conclusion, The Body Keeps the Score offers a new way of understanding trauma and, more importantly, a path toward healing. By recognizing that trauma affects both the brain and body, Kolk provides trauma survivors with the tools they need to begin their journey toward recovery. Whether it's through body-based therapies like yoga, mindfulness practices, or newer approaches like neurofeedback and EMDR, there is hope for healing. Trauma may leave deep scars, but it doesn't have to define the rest of your life. With the right tools and support, healing is not just possible, it's within reach. Thank you for joining me on this deep dive into Bessel van der Kolk's The Body Keeps the Score. If you found this video helpful, please consider sharing it with someone who might benefit from these insights. Don't forget to subscribe to Bookburst for more deep dives into the psychology of healing, growth, and understanding. Remember, healing is always possible, no matter how deeply trauma is embedded. Until next time, keep reading, keep exploring, and most importantly, take care of yourselves.